My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment, because what you are about to hear carries a truth that has been hidden behind silence for longer than you realize. Something has shifted. A conversation has already taken place, words have already been spoken, and your name has entered a room you were never physically standing inside. But do not rush ahead, because what your soulmate finally admitted to their family is only the surface of what has been happening within their heart. The part they revealed was important, yes, but the part they still could not bring themselves to say is far bigger. Stay with this message until the end, because the silence they kept after speaking your name may reveal more than everything they actually said. There came a moment when your soulmate realized that avoiding the truth was becoming harder than facing it. For a long time, they had found ways to change the subject whenever someone close to them asked why they seemed different. Their family noticed the distant look in their eyes. They noticed how certain conversations made them unusually quiet. They noticed that when relationships, commitment, future plans, or emotional happiness were mentioned, something seemed to pass across their face for only a second before disappearing. They thought they were hiding it well. They believed that if they smiled at the right moments and answered casually enough, nobody would realize that another person had quietly become connected to their deepest thoughts. But the heart has a language even silence cannot completely disguise, and eventually someone in that family noticed. Do not skip now, because this is where the first hidden door begins to open. The conversation did not begin with your soulmate announcing some dramatic confession. It began almost casually. Someone asked a simple question, perhaps expecting a simple answer. They may have asked why your soulmate had been so thoughtful lately, why they seemed distracted, or whether there was someone occupying their mind. For a moment, your soulmate could have laughed it away. They had done that before. They could have said there was nothing to discuss. They could have protected the secret one more time. Yet something inside them was tired of pretending that you were insignificant. And so, for the first time in a way that mattered, they allowed the truth about you to enter the room. They did not reveal everything. That is important. They gave their family only enough to understand that you were not some passing thought. They admitted that there was someone they could not easily forget. They may not have used the word soulmate. They may not have explained every emotion. They may even have spoken carefully, almost cautiously, because saying your name or describing your place in their life made everything feel suddenly real. But the family could hear something in the way they spoke. Their voice changed. Their expression softened. The usual defenses disappeared for a moment. And someone sitting there realized that this was not an ordinary story. Pause here, because something bigger was happening beneath those words. Your soulmate was not simply telling their family about you. They were watching their family's reactions. Every glance mattered. Every question mattered. Every pause mattered. Part of them wanted to know what would happen if the truth about you became visible. Would the family understand? Would they ask difficult questions? Would they approve? Would they challenge them? Would someone immediately recognize what your soulmate had been trying so hard not to admit even to themselves? Then came the question that changed the atmosphere. Someone asked, "What does this person really mean to you?" And suddenly, your soulmate had no easy answer. Not because they felt nothing, but because the honest answer was much larger than they were prepared to speak aloud. My child, this is the moment you must not miss. They could have said you were just someone special. They could have called you a friend, a connection, someone they cared about, someone from their past, or someone they were still trying to understand. Perhaps they used one of those safer explanations. But internally, another sentence was waiting. A sentence they had rehearsed silently many times. A sentence they had never been brave enough to give a voice. Because what they had kept from their family was not simply that they had feelings for you. It was that they had already imagined a future in which you were still there. They had pictured moments with you that they never told anyone about. Not fantasies of perfection, but ordinary things that frightened them because of how real they felt. Conversations late at night. Sitting beside you when neither of you needed to speak. Celebrations. Difficult seasons. Walking into a room and knowing you were the person they wanted to find first. Making choices while wondering how those choices would affect you. There were moments when they had caught themselves imagining what their life would look like years from now, and your presence appeared in that picture before they even consciously invited it. That is what they kept hidden. But even that is not the largest secret. Stay till the end, because there is another layer your soulmate could not reveal to the people who know them best. There is a reason this connection unsettles them in a way others never did. They have experienced attraction before. They have admired people before. They may even have cared deeply before. Yet something about you caused them to confront themselves. You touched not only the part of them that longs to be loved, but the part of them that knows it must grow if it wants to hold something meaningful. That frightened them more than rejection. Their family may believe the story is about whether two people will come together. Your soulmate knows the story is also about who they are becoming because you entered their emotional world. There were things they once accepted about themselves that suddenly became impossible to ignore. Old habits. Emotional walls. Ways of withdrawing when feelings became too intense. The tendency to overthink instead of communicate. The instinct to protect pride rather than reveal vulnerability. They began noticing these patterns more clearly because every time they imagined becoming closer to you, they could see the places within themselves that were still unfinished. And they never told their family that. Perhaps someone at that gathering smiled and asked whether you knew how strongly your soulmate felt. Your soulmate may have looked away. Maybe they gave a vague answer. Maybe they said, "It is complicated." But that sentence carried an ocean behind it. Because what could they possibly explain? How could they say that sometimes they almost reach out and then stop because the message suddenly feels too small for everything they want to express? How could they explain the nights when they replayed a memory, wondering whether you felt the same weight in that moment? How could they admit that certain songs, places, phrases, or ordinary details unexpectedly remind them of you? How could they confess that they had sometimes tried to convince themselves to move forward, only to discover that distance did not erase the questions their hearts still carried? Something huge is waiting for you in this message, and we are getting closer to it. One family member may have been more perceptive than the others. This person did not focus on the details. They watched your soulmate's face instead. They saw the hesitation. They saw the effort to sound calm. And perhaps they asked another question, quieter this time. If this person matters so much, why haven't you told us before? That question touched the real secret. Your soulmate had reasons for hiding you from conversations. Some of those reasons were practical. They did not want opinions before they understood their own feelings. They feared that family expectations could complicate something already emotionally delicate. They worried someone might judge the situation without understanding the depth of it. They may even have wanted to protect you from becoming a topic before there was anything definite to explain. But there was another reason. Once they told their family about you, they knew they could no longer pretend to themselves that you were merely temporary. Speaking about you made the connection real in a new way. That is why the confession came with such strange emotional weight. Your soulmate was not only revealing you to their family. They were revealing themselves. Imagine the moment after your name had been spoken. Perhaps the room became quiet. Perhaps someone asked what you were like. Your soulmate could have started describing you, and then something surprising happened inside them. They realized how closely they had been paying attention all this time. They knew little details. They remembered the way you respond when you are deeply interested in something. They remembered your emotional strength, perhaps even when you did not recognize it in yourself. They remembered the things you care about, the ways you have been misunderstood, the softness you protect behind strength. Maybe they remembered something you said once that you probably assumed they had forgotten. They had not forgotten. Do not skip this part, because the smallest details often expose the largest feelings. Someone in their family may have noticed how specific the description became. Your soulmate was supposed to be speaking casually, but the words became more personal. They were not describing an idea. They were describing someone they had studied with the heart. Then they caught themselves. They pulled back. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they laughed. Maybe they said, "Anyway, it doesn't matter." But it mattered. Everyone in that room could feel that it mattered, even if nobody fully understood why. And this is where the hidden truth grows deeper. Your soulmate did not tell them about the moment they first realized they could lose you. There was a moment, perhaps quiet and invisible to everyone else, when the possibility of you truly moving forward without them became real. Maybe something you said changed. Maybe you became quieter. Maybe you stopped giving the same energy. Maybe they simply realized that nobody can remain waiting forever for someone who refuses to show what they feel. That thought disturbed them. Not because they believed they owned your attention. Not because they expected you to put your life on hold. It disturbed them because suddenly they understood that their silence had consequences. They could lose a connection they had never properly acknowledged. And what would they say then? Would they tell themselves they had been protecting their heart, or would they finally admit they had been hiding from it? This was one of the truths they could not share with their family. It felt too vulnerable. Too revealing. To admit fear of losing you would be to admit that your presence had become important enough to create that fear. Yet heaven's fictional messenger whispers through this story. Sometimes the feelings people hide most carefully are the ones already changing their decisions. Your soulmate's family conversation did not end when they stopped speaking about you. Something had been set into motion. Later, perhaps when they were alone, one family member returned to the subject. The tone was different now. Less curious. More serious. They may have said, "You don't talk about people like this." Those words stayed with your soulmate. Because they knew it was true. This was not how they normally spoke. They had accidentally revealed more in their expression than they intended to reveal through language. Stay till the end, because what happened after that comment is where the story begins turning. Your soulmate may have gone somewhere quiet afterward, replaying the conversation. They remembered every question. They wondered whether they had said too much. Then almost immediately, another thought came, perhaps they had not said enough. That contradiction became impossible to ignore. For months, maybe longer, they had been caught between two instincts. One told them to protect themselves. The other told them that what they felt deserved honesty. One told them to wait until circumstances were perfect. The other reminded them that life rarely delivers perfect timing. One told them you would somehow understand without words. The other began to ask a painful question: what if you don't? That question is becoming louder. And there is something else they never told their family. They have wondered whether you already know. Whether somehow you sensed the emotional shift before they admitted it to themselves. They have looked back at conversations wondering if you saw through certain pauses. They have wondered whether you noticed when they became unusually attentive, when their tone softened, when jealousy briefly appeared and disappeared, when they wanted to ask something personal but changed their mind. They have questioned whether your heart recognized what their mouth refused to say. And perhaps that is why you are hearing this fictional message now, not as a promise about another person's private thoughts, but as a cinematic reflection of the tension that exists whenever powerful feelings remain unspoken. Because the next part of this story is not simply about what your soulmate feels. It is about what they are preparing to do with those feelings. There is a difference between caring and choosing. There is a difference between imagining and acting. There is a difference between telling family that someone matters and becoming courageous enough to tell that person directly. Your soulmate is standing somewhere near that boundary. Their family does not know this. They think the confession itself was the big revelation. They are wrong. The bigger secret concerns a decision. Something has been quietly forming inside your soulmate. Not impulsively. Not overnight. It has been building through every moment they tried to move past this connection and discovered that unanswered truth followed them. It has been building whenever they imagined future possibilities. It has been building through the uncomfortable realization that silence can become its own choice if maintained too long. And now someone in their family may have unintentionally pushed them closer to a turning point. Perhaps that person told your soulmate, if this person means something to you, eventually they deserve to know. Simple words. But your soulmate heard something enormous inside them. They could not dismiss the sentence. Because deep down, they agreed. My child, stay with me now. The part coming next is subtle, but it changes everything. Your soulmate did not respond immediately. They may have shrugged. They may have insisted that the situation was complicated. They may have listed every reason why now was not the right time. But when they were alone, those excuses no longer sounded as convincing. They began imagining what honesty might look like. Not some perfect cinematic confession. Something smaller. A message. A conversation. A question. A moment where they finally stopped speaking around the truth. And then fear entered. What if you no longer feel the same? What if too much time has passed? What if they misread the connection? What if you have already begun closing a door they once assumed would remain open? Those questions stopped them before. But now another question has appeared, and this one is more powerful than all the others. What if staying silent becomes the reason they lose you? That is the question they kept from their family. And that is still not the biggest thing they kept hidden. Because while everyone around them was discussing feelings, your soulmate was thinking about something far more concrete. A promise they made privately to themselves. Nobody in that family knows about it. Perhaps not even their closest friend knows. They made this promise after a moment connected to you, possibly after a misunderstanding, a period of distance, or a night when they realized how deeply the uncertainty was affecting them. They told themselves that if a certain sign appeared, if a certain circumstance changed, or if they reached a particular point emotionally, they would stop running from the truth. And recently, something connected to that private condition has changed. This is why the family conversation happened now rather than months ago. It was not random. Something inside your soulmate had already begun moving before they ever entered that room. The conversation merely exposed it. Don't leave now, because the next revelation carries the strongest emotional weight yet. After speaking about you, your soulmate may have returned to an object, a message, a photograph, a memory, or some small reminder of the connection. They stared at it differently. The family conversation had made it impossible to reduce you to a passing thought anymore. For the first time, they saw the situation from outside themselves. They heard how they sounded when talking about you. They realized how obvious the feeling had become. And something inside them quietly admitted, "This is bigger than I wanted it to be." Not bigger in a frightening way. Bigger in meaning. Bigger in consequence. Bigger in the way it was shaping what they wanted from the future. Perhaps they once believed love should arrive without disrupting anything. No difficult choices. No vulnerability. No uncertainty. But you became connected to an uncomfortable lesson. Meaningful relationships often ask people to become more honest than comfort allows. And now your soulmate must choose whether to grow toward that honesty or retreat again. Their family saw only the beginning of this battle. You are about to discover the rest. Someone in that family, perhaps without realizing the impact of their words, asked one final question before the conversation ended. Do you see this person in your future? Your soulmate froze. For a few seconds, no one spoke. They could have said no. They could have laughed. They could have avoided everything. Instead, they gave an answer so carefully chosen that nobody realized what it truly meant. They said something like, "I don't know what will happen." Their family heard uncertainty. But inside, your soulmate was hiding another sentence. "I know what I want to happen." There is an enormous difference between those two statements. Their family heard caution. Their heart held desire. Their family heard someone unsure of the future. Their heart was already imagining one. And this, my child, is the truth beneath the truth. The secret was never simply that your soulmate cared about you. The secret is that somewhere along the way, they began measuring future decisions against the possibility of having you in their life. They wondered where you would fit. They wondered what would need to change. They wondered whether their family would welcome you. They wondered whether old situations would need to be resolved. They wondered whether they were emotionally ready to offer you something more stable than confusing signals. These are not the thoughts of someone completely untouched by a connection. But the most important question remains unanswered. What exactly has your soulmate decided? Because something has changed since that family conversation. A choice is moving closer. A sentence is becoming harder to hold back. And one person in their family may already know more about the secret than your soulmate realizes. Later that evening, after everyone had moved on, that person approached them privately and said something that made your soulmate's entire expression change. It was not criticism. It was not a warning. It was not what your soulmate expected. The person told them they had noticed something long before tonight. Something about the way your soulmate reacted whenever your name, or even the idea of you, came close to the conversation. Then they revealed one detail your soulmate had never told anyone. A detail they should not have known. For a moment, your soulmate could not speak. Because that family member had just uncovered the hidden reason your soulmate had been afraid to tell the full truth. And what they said next was connected not only to your soulmate's feelings, but to a decision your soulmate has been quietly preparing to make about you. A decision their family still does not know. A decision that could finally explain why your soulmate kept the biggest part of this story hidden in the first place. And just as your soulmate asked, "How did you know that?" the family member gave an answer that changed everything they thought they understood about the conversation. Because apparently, your name had been mentioned in that family before your soulmate ever confessed anything at all. And the person who first mentioned you was someone your soulmate never expected.